Classical music flourished for hundreds of years until Leonard Bernstein came along. Everything he did was for the greater glorification of Leonard Bernstein. He purposely made composers other than him sound bad. He wasn't smart enough to write a symphony, and he never did. Putting the title symphony on two pieces that are not symphonies is something that only a scam artist would do. The press made him their sacred cow and created a false narrative that he was the greatest conductor. I grew up watching him on TV, ruining the way symphonies and concertos were performed, and conning the top classical music students into going down a path that would stop their memory prediction frameworks from developing. He created a toxic environment for pianists, composers, and conductors to develop the ability to process variables in bigger and bigger batches, making them all stupid. Some of them became mentally ill, and others engaged in criminal activity. Beethoven put creativity, which is the cornerstone of intellectual development, into his concertos as a requirement. Bernstein took it out. I know this not just because I saw him dumbing down arts education on TV, but because I studied with one of his friends, concert pianist Ivan Davis, who also performed with him. I showed up at one of my lessons with a cadenza. That's a 3 or 4 minute section I created for one of Beethoven's concertos. And Davis gave me a stern warning that Leonard Bernstein would not book any pianist to perform with his orchestra who created cadenzas. Davis said that the other conductors followed Bernstein's lead. Davis also said that the orchestras were no longer performing brand new symphonies that were brilliant. Davis said that if Beethoven were a current composer trying to get his symphonies performed, no one would perform them, and the public wouldn't even know they existed. Davis said that Beethoven would have to go score films if he wanted to earn a living. This policy of blackballing the top new classical composers started with Leonard Bernstein. One of his first victims was Walter Scharf, who was probably the greatest composer of his generation, and that's the same generation as Bernstein. I heard 5 or 6 minutes of one of Walter's symphonies, and it was absolutely brilliant. In her new book, Barbra Streisand refers to him as the wonderful Walter Scharf. I studied film scoring with him at UCLA, and I ran into him at an ASCAP meeting in 1991 when I was a recording artist on Virgin Records. He insisted that we sit together for the meeting, and then we hung out with each other at the reception in the International Ballroom at the Beverly Hilton. Walter introduced me to a half a dozen film score composers who wrote symphonies. Walter said that some of their symphonies were as good as Brahms, and no one had ever heard them. These distinguished classical musicians were in their 80s. They're all gone, and their symphonies have yet to be performed. The same is true with my generation. The students in my film score class wrote symphonies like Schubert and Beethoven, and none of those symphonies have been heard yet either. Because of Leonard Bernstein, orchestras have become art scams. Their financial foundation is based on criminal activity. It is a crime to solicit donations by making false claims about your presentations. Many of them use this phrase to scam money out of people and corporations, to perform, to present at the highest level of excellence. Really? Just look at music history. The highest level of excellence in conducting are the conductors who can create their own symphonies. There are plenty of composers that create symphonies, that know how to conduct an orchestra. They're not using them. They're using the conductors who can't do that. And all they do is they synchronize the musicians and create a visual display as per Bernstein's teachings. But what they're really doing is destroying the sound of all the symphonies that were designed to be performed in small concert halls. The orchestras are featuring stupid conductors, and then they're lying about them to solicit donations. With new composers, the highest level of excellence in composition are the composers who can process variables at the level of Beethoven or Brahms. The lowest level are the atonal composers who process variables at the level of a grade school child. That's who they use. Soliciting donations by claiming that atonal music is the highest level of excellence in composition is wire fraud. Bernstein's degradation of the arts ruined the classical recording industry. It's not what you think it is. They make vanity records. I know this because I was a real recording artist on Virgin Records. This is the #1 selling solo classical piano album of the 1990s. As a real recording artist, I was expected to sell as many records as a debuting rock band. I did it, and I made it onto the rock charts. I posted them on my website. My album and 2 opera albums are in the top 100 sales. Opera singers are legitimate recording artists. Now, if you take the opera singers out of the mix, 99% of the classical recordings are vanity records paid for by the orchestras. Look at the album covers. A photo shoot for a real recording artist is a big production. It's like being on a movie set. But with vanity records, there's no big production. They use clip art. Sometimes, like this one, they use a picture of a leaf. The Bernstein effect on arts education created a big group of people with a jealousy-based mental illness that manifests itself by them acting out against any classical musician with a fully developed brain. With the orchestras, it's not just the conductor. The artistic directors have the same classical education and the same mental illness that goes along with it. That's why they use stupid people. That's why they play atonal music instead of brilliant new symphonies. They hate anyone who could write a symphony. Walter Scharf said that the orchestras were hostile towards him and the other film composers he knew that wrote symphonies. I've had the same experience. In addition, I was hounded by mentally ill professors at college before they threw me out of school. I've had death threats. I've had to perform for a room full of police because the university campus I was performing at had received threats from a group of mentally ill classical piano players who were driving in from another state to disrupt my concerts. The history of edits in the Wikipedia article about me provides irrefutable evidence of worldwide manifestations of mental illness in the form of vandalism. They are obsessed with erasing my accomplishments. Sometimes the mentally ill people come in and erase every word in the article. At one point, there was such a massive amount of vandalism on that article that the administrators of Wikipedia put a picture of a lock on it, stopping all edits. This is the classical world that Leonard Bernstein built.